ladies and gentlemen. I am Cadet First Class Allie Kearns, and I will be your Master of Ceremonies for today's session. It is my privilege to welcome you to this 29th Annual National Character and Leadership Symposium session. Our panelists today are excited to discuss how ethics and respect for human dignity played a role in the air and ground efforts of Operation Allies Refuge. Joining us today are three esteemed panel members who have played unique and pivotal roles in Operation Allies Refuge. Our panelists are joined by Cadet First Class Justin Yates, who will moderate this panel. Justin Yates, over to you.
Thank you so much, Cadet Kearns, and everybody here for joining us today. Before we begin, I would like to add that the views presented are those of the panelists and do not necessarily represent the views of the Department of Defense and its components. We will now begin the moderated portion of our panel, which will be followed by an open question and answer portion. So start thinking of your questions now. To start off, I'd like to ask each panelist to introduce themselves, starting with Captain Swysgood.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? All right, cool. So I'm Captain Hannah Swysgood. I am an aeromedical evacuation nurse, also known as a flight nurse, stationed out at Scott Air Force Base, and I was a part of Operation Allies Refuge. So I'm going to pass it on to you.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Leyro. I am a C-17 pilot stationed at Charleston, 2014 graduate of your United States Air Force Academy. That's right. I went to Vance for pilot training, stayed there to be a FAPE, first assignment instructor pilot, and then I've been at Charleston for the past 18 months.
Hey, good afternoon. Lt Col Alex Pelbath. I was a 2001 grad from the Academy. A wrestler here while I was attending, and then been a C-17 guy for about 20 years. Most recently got to Charleston about 2017, was the 16th Airlift Squadron Commander, and then about a year ago I transitioned into leading the C-17 Special Operations Unit. I'm gonna sort of set the stage for us here, sort of set the scene for what the three of us did in Afghanistan. So you're gonna go back to August 14th. My team got a call to go forward in Afghanistan from Charleston. And that was based on what we were seeing from the Taliban and the advances that they were making throughout the country. So C-17s at the time, we were very busy with what we call a retrograde of American forces, systematically closing bases from the south to the north. But then on the 14th of August, it really looked like the Taliban was going to take the city of Kabul. So we went forward on the 14th, got into crew rest at Al Udeid in Qatar, which turned out to be a major hub for all of us on the 15th. I woke up on the morning of the 16th, and President Ghani had fled the country of Afghanistan. So that to us was the signal that the Taliban was fully in control, and it sort of changed the scope of the mission for us and for how rapidly we needed to get forces out of there. So on the 16th, I flew into Afghanistan with my small team, delivering a force. While we were on the ground there, we wound up surprisingly evacuating some people. And at this point, it was very orderly. It was exactly what you'd expect to see from evacuation of non-combatants. Within 24 hours, things devolved rapidly, and probably what all of you guys saw on the news, within 48 hours, we had a C-17 take off with over 800 passengers for the first time ever. And then we had a C-17 that, the tragedy of lives that were lost when they tried to take off there. And then what we began to, for those of us who were forward, we started calling it what you guys all saw on TV, the massive Afghans on the field in Kabul. We were calling the zombie apocalypse. That happened sometime around the 18th. And then we really got hot and heavy. So what you're going to hear from the rest of us is each of our roles through that 16-day period from the 16th of August until the 31st and the final mission. I wound up being the air mission commander for that final flight. There were 5 C-17s on the final day. I was the last C-17 off the ground. Jasmine next to me, she flew 4 separate missions in and out doing non-combatant evacuation operations. And Hannah was a flight nurse, as she mentioned, who responded the day of the bombings, probably the most tragic day we had out there, treating a lot of the Afghan civilians who were victims of the suicide IED that day.
Thank you, sir. So the first question is actually coming back to you. And kind of with that stage set, how difficult was it to put individual emotions aside when conducting the different missions?
Very challenging, I would say, and probably very different from all of us. Everybody's got a different perspective. I graduated right 2001, May of 2001. A couple months later was 9/11. So the entirety of my career was spent with conflict in Afghanistan. And so my emotions, I kind of went through all of it, both the past 20 years, but then of course what we were seeing on the ground there with the evacuation operation. I can't speak for everybody else how you put emotions aside. I'll tell you specifically what I did. And the emotions are wide-ranging, right? Frustration with how things are going, and nervousness, which a lot of times in the military, nervousness is another way of saying sometimes you get a little bit scared while you're out there as things are crazy. And then, of course, pride in what we were doing. So the way that I do it is I focus on the little things. And I think this is very common for a lot of athletes. You focus on the moment, you make it small. As a wrestler, for me, or anybody who's competed in something significant, you get real nervous the night before. You find a way to make it really, really small, and you just focus on some little things. So what we were doing out there is putting all that stuff aside, all the stuff we were seeing on social media, all the stuff that you guys were seeing, that America was seeing back home. You put that aside, you get your mission, and you focus on executing like your mission, like very specifically what you are there to do, and you go execute that. And one of the great things about us being in the military is we get to be agnostic about a lot of other things that are going on out there, and we get to focus just on our mission. And there's a lot of pride in that. And by making it small, I think we were able to, one, be incredibly successful in what we did, but also feel very rewarded in what we were doing.
So for a follow-up, or next question for Captain Leyro. So, ma'am, obviously you had a couple different missions in the evacuation. So how did you keep the mission fresh on your mind and continuously carry it out even through the tough situations?
So before every mission, we would get the crew papers. We get all the information regarding what we were going to be executing that day. We'd look over everything. I personally would look over some checklists to make sure I'm still a co-pilot, and make sure I knew what I was doing. And then over the course of the day and over the course of the several weeks, my crew adopted this mantra, and another co-pilot, Mike Dembski, instituted a vibe check. And we would start every day with a vibe check. Everyone would be on headset, and he'd be like, vibe check, guys. And people would report up, vibes are good, vibes are through the roof, vibes through the moon. And it was a way to keep our heads in the game, keep morale, maybe not at its highest, because things were kind of intense, but keep everyone focused.
I'll piggyback on that just to give Jasmine a little bit more credit for what she and her crews were doing. I mean, this was unlike anything that any of us have ever done before. This has never happened in history, the largest airlift evacuation in history, and it was incredibly challenging conditions. So she's loading her airplane with more people that we've ever put on a C-17 ever, and you're doing it in some on one side of it in extreme heat, 120-degree heat is pretty miserable. And then on the other side of it, you're doing it in the combat zone. And so this is incredibly challenging. It was very, very wearing on all of the crews, as you went through those long days. And so the stuff that she implemented with her crew, pretty critical to, I think, making sure that they were able to go back again and again and again and again to do it.
And to give you context, I was on a hard crew, 5-person crew, 2 co-pilots, an aircraft commander, and 2 loadmasters, and then we had a flying crew chief who stayed with us, so 6th person. And I was the oldest person on my crew. I'm 29 years old. I was 29 at the time, and the youngest loadmaster was 20. So we were all in our 20s, and we're executing something unprecedented, especially for us.
So kind of drawing it back out to the theme of ethics and respect for human dignity, Captain Swysgood, ma'am, how did you see the concept of ethics and the respect for human dignity embodied in some of the events of the actual evacuation?
So in nursing, right, human dignity is a huge part of what we do. We work with a variety of people every single day, and you have to understand each individual person and their culture, their background when working with them. So as a nurse who's been doing this for about 6 years now, I think of it as we have internal biases, and when we went into these missions, we had to acknowledge those biases. So we acknowledged them, we talked about the limitations that those biases might have had, and then we put them aside. So going into this, I actually have had experience with the culture of some of these people in a prior deployment, and that really helped with us understanding and bringing that human dignity and allowing people to board and making sure that their family members are with them, keeping them together, trying to seat them appropriately so that there's not the fear aspect, they're not freaking out, they're not panicking, their family is with them. And keeping that in your mind when dealing with, I took care of the females, right? I'm a female, I took care of the females. I had a male medical crew director. If we needed a male to take care of some of the males, we made sure we were very distinctive in how we cared and how we went about that care, because we took the time beforehand to talk about our internal biases, our internal culture, and what the differences were. So we really took time to think about what we were doing and how we would go about doing those missions.
Do you mind if I say something about you? Yeah, this is great. This is turning into a little bit. I get to celebrate some of the folks who are out there with us. I'll say the same thing about Captain Swysgood. So what they were doing, what our medevac folks do, their job is to take care of Americans. All of our medevac forces are there to treat American wounded. In this case, Hannah and her team responded to the Afghan wounded. So there, in addition to the 13 Americans who were killed that day, there were 200 Afghans who were killed and countless wounded. So her team, she responded to babies with shrapnel in their faces and missing limbs and things like that. And so I know the challenge you had and the great job you guys did specifically in this case of referring to human dignity is you're now doing this role that you've been trained for, you're now doing for a nation that you weren't, for a people that you weren't ever expecting to do this for.
So yeah, as he said, story behind, we flew 3 different missions, my team did. The first mission that we went into, the situation was getting out the evacuees that had been affected by the blast. So we carried a lot of children on that flight, and they were very wounded, and we took care of them. Again, that mindset of keeping those families together as best as you can to help de-stress. We had no interpreters on any of the flights that we were on, and the challenges that we faced without any interpreters was pretty intense. And these people were in pain, and I take it, all those flights give me such an overwhelming sense of gratitude, because I know that every single one of those patients survived, and they're in a better position now than they were before. So it's an amazing and gratifying experience to have been a part of. Another one of our missions was a Stork mission. So we had 2-day-old babies, we had multiple pregnant women, we had people that potentially could have given birth. I actually work with the lady, Captain Green, who delivered that baby on the C-17 in the bathroom. And I actually handed her the backpack that she used to help deliver it that day. It was crazy coming back. Our chief nurse grabbed me and was like, "You have no idea what you just did. You just helped deliver that baby up in that air by putting together a backpack full of just first aid supplies." She used that in that flight. It was crazy, amazing experience to be a part of. And I get to work with those kind of cool people. I have Captain Mendoza in my office who did pericardial resuscitation on a patient down in Kabul. So we have some really cool and amazing people out there who do this job every day. And again, it's so outside of our realm. So outside of our realm. We stick to checklists and we stick to what we know, and this was new, very new to us.
I know I certainly can't imagine that situation, so that's really impressive. So Captain Leyro, going back to you, ma'am, as a graduate of this fine institution and then turned operational, what do you think are some habits that our cadets and our young college students can kind of solidify now so that they can make the right decisions when faced with a complex situation like the one you faced?
My recommendation is to choose your perspective. We get so caught up in this feeling that the system is out to get us, or we're not being met where we are, or not being treated properly, and the system's really ambivalent to us. So the important thing is to wake up every morning and choose your perspective. You get to choose to be good, to be noble, to live gratefully. Yeah, that's my crew. I love my crew. I had an awesome experience because of my crew in all of this stuff. And we chose to have the perspective of gratitude every day. And that vibe check, that was the start of it. And then we got down, and even after we'd been sitting on the ramp for hours and hours and hours, we still did a vibe check. And yeah, went back and did it again the next day.
I'll add to that on that same topic. You choose your perspective. I would say be ready. None of us knew we were going to find ourselves in the position that we did. Sitting in your seats 20 years ago, you never could have told me I was going to be the last aircraft off the ground in Afghanistan. Nobody ever could have predicted that. You don't know what's coming next. You guys see what's happening today in the world. None of us could have predicted this either. So the lesson for me is you cannot predict the future. All you can do, Jasmine mentioned this earlier, I'm going to steal a line from you, is the things you can control. I've heard of 2 things you can control in your life: attitude and effort. Just be ready, because you don't know when your number is going to get called.
Yeah, kind of following up on that for the whole panel, what's some advice you would give in terms of leadership? How to develop as a better leader, how to go into a career as an instant leader, especially when oftentimes during the evacuation you're kind of on your own and you're separated from your home unit?
So I'm from off the streets, right? So I didn't have the leadership prowess that our USAFA grads come out with, which is pretty impressive and very amazing. So for me on the ground, we have changed our AFIs. We have changed our dynamic in the AE world completely over the last year. From when I started to now, very different. Our motto, we're ready now. We can pick up our backpacks and go. So you can't have that mindset of, oh, I'm just a lieutenant. Oh, I can't do this. No, you have to make those split-second decisions now, and that's how our new wave is forming, is making those split-second decisions, grooming our leaders, making sure that people know what the guidelines are, but also how to bend them or how to flex them in order to get the mission done. And we're seeing those changes right now, and we have to be ready at a moment's notice.
Yeah, all right. My tip on this, look, there's leadership lessons, and the reason we're preparing the cadets, you cadets, to go out into the world is to be leaders, right, to be officers. And one of the challenges we found out in Afghanistan was the mission was changing very rapidly. And there was, generally, if you're unaware of how a mission gets executed, you're given a set of mission papers. You're told your mission, here it is, go execute it. If there's any challenges, we've got a sat phone. You literally have a phone in the airplane. You make a call back and you get approval to do something different. That didn't exist in this case. The system was overwhelmed. 80 C-17s and over 100 aircrew out there. First of all, there's nobody to call. Second of all, there's nobody could have given you the right answer. These were all judgment calls that were being executed out there. And so the best you can do is we were given commander's intent. Hey, the mission is go do this evac and go do it the best you can. And so what I found from all of our folks out there is what they executed very, very well was the ability to use their judgment, to use leadership, and something I believe about specifically about commanders. We call our left seaters, by the way, if you didn't know this, pilot and commanders, we're called aircraft commanders. We call them aircraft commanders for a reason. We put them in command of an airplane. And a commander's job is to execute judgment in the application of the rules, not to just blindly follow the rules. And so my leadership tip on that is this is not something you're going to learn overnight. It's not something you're going to graduate with here. This is something you learn over a lifetime, and you learn it through mentorship and leadership development that the Air Force is going to provide you.
Sir, a quick follow-up on that. I heard you have a favorite book. I was wondering if you would recommend it to the audience.
Yeah, I do. So this is, I'm going to give you guys 2 books. One that as cadets, you probably are going to just love this title, and it's Great Leaders Have No Rules. Just read the book, okay? And you'll learn why leaders need to be, this is what it teaches you. You got to be flexible as a leader. And the second book, Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership. I've made that book mandatory for any of my leadership team, and then any of my friends who are about to take command. I unofficially made that book mandatory before you go into a significant leadership role. So those two books, Great Leaders Have No Rules and Extreme Ownership.
Great. I hope everyone is on Amazon ordering it already. But before we open it up to in-person questions, is there any re-attacks or last points you want to make before we open it up?
So I left the experience I've had with Operation Allies Refuge with one overarching emotion, and that emotion was gratitude, truly. I'm grateful to have been a part of it. It is exceptional. I think it's something that I'll be able to look back on forever and fill me with joy and fulfillment. But also I'm grateful to have been born in a place that I have the opportunity to be here. That was incredibly evident when I had 400 people stacked on the jet, and at the very back, everyone was sitting, and the very last row was standing, and these little girls were waving, and they were so excited to see, I hope, a female at the front of the jet accepting them. And it fills my heart with joy and makes my spirit soar to think that those girls now could potentially have the opportunities that I've had now that they're in the States, if those girls are still in the States. And so I leave you with choose the perspective, and I recommend choosing a perspective of gratitude. It's not easy. It's not always the most appropriate, I guess. Doesn't always make the most sense, but you can always find something to be grateful for. And yeah, I'm just super grateful to have been a part of this.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'd now like to open up the floor to questions. So for our in-person audience, feel free to come up to one of the microphones in the room. And then for our virtual attendees, you may type a question in the discussion board aligned with this session on the NCLS event platform. And for both, please wait for you to be called and we'll get started. Sir, right here to the left.
I'm Colonel Hoffman, class of '63. I have a little combat myself, 377 missions, some 1,600 combat hours. And I would like to compliment you on your job, and I would like to offer for your enjoyment what I learned about rules and regulations over my career. I had a commander who explained to me that rules and regulations were for beginners and people without good judgment. For you cadets, I would like to remind you that you are by definition beginners. Thank you.
Thank you for your service, sir. Thanks for all your support.
Okay. Well, that's a tough act to follow, but I would ask if you guys could continue talking about the rules that you guys had to break. I'm an aircraft commander. I've had to break rules before. Sir, were you providing top cover? What was that discussion like, and then what was the risk that you guys had to buy?
Yeah, so one of the challenges we had was we're going to go back to the caveat at the beginning. These are my personal beliefs, don't represent the Air Force. Yeah. But one of the challenges we had was this evolved so rapidly that we wound up with aircraft operating under different leadership flags, so to speak, okay? So we had a couple different bosses out there. It was very, very challenging. So in addition to who do you call, which was always the number one question, we had even if you call them, what kind of answer are you going to give? So specifically, the things we were violating were, to give the easiest one, 450 people on a C-17. That number kept growing, right? It was that first jet that took off. By the way, Captain Mark Lawson was the pilot, one of the pilots of that jet, Reach 871, I think, that had over 800 people on it. Mark was supposed to be here today. Mark is forward because of what's going on right now with Russia. So Mark didn't make it because he's out hacking the mish. So shout out to Mark for that one. So these are the rules they had to break. Hey, their aircraft was overrun. What do you do? So they chose to go. Hey, the best decision that we can make right now is to go. So they took off with over 800 people on board. Other decisions we had to make was, it's 3-hour flight from LUD to Kabul. So 3 hours up there, maybe an hour or two on the ground, 8 hours round trip, right? So long. This thing was taking 16, 20, 24, 30 hours for some people. Our max crew duty day is 24 hours. Our max tactical duty day is 18 hours. And we were routinely violating that. I mean, we were coming back into LUD and there were aircraft stacked everywhere. So you had two choices. LUD was getting overwhelmed with the amount of people we had in there. So what we discovered very early on was you would land and you'd have to wait 3 hours for them to download your airplane. 450 Afghans on board in 120-degree heat was a very challenging situation. People were getting disgruntled. You would too. Right? Any of us stuck in that condition will get disgruntled. So aircrew were deciding, hey, I'm not going to land. I'm going to go hold. And they were finding tankers. They were getting on the radio. And they were looking for tankers in the area so they could do air refueling to get more gas so they could hold longer. These are the types of decisions that folks were making without consulting leadership, and that by the letter of the law they weren't following the letter of the law. They were the correct decision every time. There you go. Does that answer? And Jasmine's got one.
I do have an additional answer to that too. It's my first run. Everything was normal through Kabul. We come back, we land, we sit on the ramp. And we had heard that everyone had been sitting on the ramp for a few hours at this point. It was still pretty early in this whole system. And so we're like, over under 4 hours. Everyone's like, half and half. I started a timer. So I don't know if you guys saw that timer that's gone up. 11 hours and 27 minutes later, I left my aircraft. I got picked up by the bus. Between that time, those first 6 hours, people were on the jet. And they were dying. Not literally, but hopefully. They were passed out. We had little kids who were pale and having trouble. We had to keep calling security forces and medics. And it got to the point where it was inhumane. We had the one lav, and we ended up deciding we're going to let them off the jet. And so we're calling, just to let everyone know, the overarching system. We let them know, hey, we're letting them off the jet. And they're like, we don't advise that you do that. We're like, we're letting them off this jet. And they sat outside in the heat, because it was somewhat cooler than the back of the jet, for another 4 hours. And so they got picked up maybe hour 10, and then we finally got picked up as the aircrew at hour 11 and a half. Those are the kind of decisions we had to make. We had a little discussion before we let them off the jet. Hey, if we go down for this, we're all going down together. My aircraft commander was like, I got this, guys. We're like, no, we all support you. This is the right decision.
So in the AE world, RAFI states that we cannot take patients that are not manifested. We took patients that were not manifested, right? Yeah, right? So our chief nurse said day one, he was like, I will give you top cover. He said, if there's someone standing out there that needs a ride, you will bring them on board. I don't care what that had not been passed down from any other leadership at that point in time. It was very early on. He made it very known throughout all of our crews, if there is somebody standing there and if they can come on, you will bring them on. I don't care who it is, bring them on. So we broke those rules every single time.
Just point of clarification too, you asked if I gave him top cover. I was the air mission commander for the final mission. I was not the air mission commander for the NEO. So I wouldn't have been in a position to do anything like that. But my role is very specific to that final night.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Cadet 4th Class Holmes from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Det 365. My question is, how did you keep yourself and your crew calm and clear-minded in such unpredictable and unprecedented circumstances? And what advice would you give people who could be in a similar situation one day?
I feel like I won the jackpot with my crew. We vibed from day one, and there's something to be said about having an incredible crew and having people that you enjoy working with, even if no one is the best at anything that they do, which my crew is awesome, not saying that, but I would much rather work with people who are good-hearted and still good at what they do than people who are number one and terrible. That being said, yeah, we just had a good vibe, man. The vibe check was legit. We did it. It worked yeah, it worked like a dream. And we ended up working like a well-oiled crew. We supported each other. I would go and check. I was actually roommates with one of my loadmasters, and when she was sick, we hitchhiked. I hitchhiked for her to get to the clinic, because that's what you got to do. You got to support your people. Yeah, we checked on each other, and we still did it.
I've been wanting to tell the story for a long time. You're the first people I've told the story to. The hardest decision, not the hardest decision, the only decision I had to make the final night for the final mission. So back to me being the Mike Charlie for the final mission. We briefed our crews like this. I had 8 C-17 crews. We were in a big theater. We'd been building this plan for like 2 weeks. And to get to the point where it's done, like it's done. Everybody knows their role. We're very confident what we're going to go do. And now what? Now everybody goes to bed. You try to find a way to not think about it, not get nervous. I did a fantasy football draft. The night before that final mission, I did a fantasy football draft. So the hardest decision I had to make that day was whether to draft Saquon Barkley or Aaron Jones. And I made a mistake in that draft, which is okay. But these are the things you got to do. I say this jokingly, but not really. This is you got to get your mind off of it. You got to take time out sometimes. You cannot focus on it all the time, or you'll be consumed by it. When we left the auditorium that looked like this, our crews, I saw the confidence in all of our crews getting ready to go execute this final mission. There's nothing left to be said. The worst thing you can do is continue to dwell and focus on it. So just like I'd say, go back to what I said before, just like an athlete preparing for a big game, you got to find a way to take your mind off it sometime after you feel like you're fully prepared.
I also had an amazing crew. But what we did is we had a crew song. So we'd get into our crew bus, and we knew that today would be hard, and we didn't know where we were going sometimes. But we'd turn that song on, and we'd all scream it out loud as we could, set the tone for the day. High energy, good attitudes. You cannot say enough about having a good attitude, even at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're getting into this crew bus. So snap, yep, that's right. So yeah, that was the biggest thing, was every time we got into that crew bus from day one, we'd put on a song and we'd all sing it together, something high tempo, something upbeat, and we'd go with that attitude throughout the day.
I have a question from the virtual audience. Dr. Greg Glover would like to know how this has affected you going forward and change your perspective on your jobs and your careers in the Air Force. And to piggyback off that, Miss Heidi Darrell wants to know if you would consider any actions such as like guidelines or rules that you would like instill in order to like increase your humanitarian effort.
Guidelines or rules to increase the humanitarian effort?
To improve the effort. She specifically asked, would you gather all C-17 crews to create a guideline or rule breaking that benefits everyone for humanitarian reasons?
That's a good question. I would say no with caveats. I think I know where the doctor's going with the question, but we were executing what we call mission type orders, which is essentially commander's intent. You're given commander's intent. And that is by far the best thing you can do in an unknown situation like this, where we're talking about decentralized control. I mean, we really needed to get it down to the lowest level to execute a mission like that. One of the first times we've ever proved this concept of mission type orders was what happened in Afghanistan. And I think the Air Force believes this was an overwhelming success, something that we can transport going forward. So what we can do is probably codify what that is, do lessons learned, which the Air Force has done. We've done countless after actions on this to take lessons like this for whatever we're going to build going forward. So I would say the one thing we can do if going forward, if this ever were to happen again or something like that, is that we execute the future fight the same way we executed what we did in Afghanistan, by giving just commander's intent and letting the air crew execute the mission.
Good afternoon, panel. Thank you for being here. So I know back here in the States, one of the first things to go viral were the pictures and videos of people holding on to the outside of the aircraft, often falling perilously to their death. I was wondering if any of the pilots, if you were ever in one of those aircraft, and if you could just speak to like the thoughts, the emotions, and just the initial reaction and decision making in the flight deck when that was happening.
Yeah, we Jasmine and I both know the aircrew in that sense. I happened to be in the JOC at the time, and the Joint Operations Center at the time, watching the live feed from Kabul. We watched that happen live. And then by coincidence, they happen to be some friends of ours. What they were going through, so if there's probably a lot that didn't make it out there, but we were doing everything we could, the United States military, to disperse that crowd. So using every type of non-lethal we had. There were Apache helicopters flying really low over that crowd trying to disperse it, and really nothing worked. The only thing that worked was the C-17 eventually outran the mob, right? A runway's 2 miles long, and so they're taxiing probably 10 miles an hour. The mob couldn't catch up, that was it. But they were in constant communication with folks on the ground, and they did not take off. Two things, the information they had, two critical things they had, was one, they knew where the mob was on the runway, and the mission computer told them that they were going to take off before they hit the mob, and that was true, right? They did not strike anybody on the ground. The other thing they did was they asked, they were talking to folks on the ground, including the helicopter pilots, like, hey, is our aircraft clear? And so it just was a perspective. Unfortunately, nobody saw the people that were hiding in the gear well. But they took off with the knowledge that their airplane was clear completely, that none of that was going to happen. So I would never speak for them and what they were going through, other than we know them personally. That's a very challenging situation for them to have experienced. But I do know that they executed that takeoff with the knowledge that they were not going to injure anybody.
Yes, we do know them. My recommendation for people who are adjacent to hardship, so these people are my friends, and even though I personally didn't go through this, my recommendation for anyone in the future, just reach out. What are they going to do? What's the worst that they can do? Get upset that you show that you care? Hardship is inevitable in this career, in this life. Yeah, tell your people you love them. I'm constantly reminded, especially when stuff like this happens, two things. What we do is dangerous, and tell your people you love them.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cadet 4th Class Sharkey from Cadet Squadron 1, and my question is, so for this discussion of, human dignity, in what areas can you advise the future officers here to develop themselves, to be able to make these correct, right decisions, which, would be breaking ROEs, but are in the, purpose and intent of human dignity? And it doesn't have to be like a really deep answer, because that's kind of a vague question.
I'll let you talk about that. That's a tough one, because I think it comes up to the individual, individual beliefs. And allow me 20 years removed from the Air Force Academy to tout the core values, because I would say I learned what the Air Force Academy's core values are when I was here, but they don't become part of you because you went to this school, because you went to the academy. So whatever's in here in you, these decisions are made ahead of time. This is what I'll tell you. And Jasmine's going to talk about this in just a second. But the way that you treat people, whether it's in the military or out of the people, I think has to do with what's in here, and that isn't something that's developed overnight or because you went to the United States Air Force Academy or anywhere else to learn those things.
So before we fly, every time we brief contingencies, we say, if something bad happens, this is what we're going to do. If this thing happens, we're going to do this. If this thing happens, we're going to do this. So we briefed abort criteria for all of our missions out of Kabul. And we had to have a very real conversation with our crew that if there were people on the runway, this was just my crew. I think a lot of the other crews were doing something similar. But in order to get off the ground, if there were people on the runway, we would continue with the takeoff. If there were vehicles or things that would prevent the aircraft from continuing, then we would abort. That's a pretty stark realization. And yeah, that, like you said, that opinion, that ability to make that decision was formed over years of experience.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
So for our last question, moderator's privilege, I have one for you guys. So we've seen a couple of the amazing pictures that have been going around, and we heard the story about the timer, but I wanted to see if there are any other good stories referenced in the pictures going on the slideshow.
We made the slideshow last night. Yeah. Hannah and I went through a bunch of our pictures. I have so many pictures from this experience. I honestly regret not taking more, but we were busy. Yeah, this one's a great one. Okay, so the woman on the right, Jordan, was our loadmaster and my roommate during all of this. And she bought this flag back when we were deployed. And I was like, we're going to take this picture in front of the jet. We took one with the American flag, too. But we wanted to get a cool picture, a funny picture, with 2 women and a bunch of dudes in front of the C-17. And, you know, everyone was all for it. It's little things. It's being with your people, taking care of them. She would start, I have a video of it, but she would start every morning with a positive affirmation. And she would bring me in, we'd look in the mirror, and she'd be like, Jasmine, you're gonna crush today, you're gonna do awesome, you're gonna take a bunch of people, we're gonna fly them to safety. And she'd talk to herself, she'd be like, Jordan, you're gonna deal with all this BS, and you do such an awesome job. Yeah, it was little things like that make this life exceptional.
So some of the other things in this, if you saw the tents that went up on some of those photos, my crew helped build those. If you see the inoculations that happened, my crew helped do inoculations. Any time that we were down and we weren't flying, we were out there at the tents helping the Army man all of those stations for all of those evacuees. We were out there getting supplies for them, clothes, food, doing drives. We weren't just sitting. We were out there. We were on the ground 24/7 ops, making sure that as much as we could do, we had the life support areas taken care of for all of those evacuees.
Yeah, this picture doesn't exist in the slideshow, but on the final night, we take off. So if you guys don't know this, the aviation enthusiasts out there in the world have gotten pretty good at tracking airplanes all over the planet from takeoff to landing. They're really, really good at tracking flight paths, and you've probably already seen some of it going on in Russia. So us knowing this, we have some techniques we use to try to mask that signature. Well, we land in Kabul, we execute our mission. We think we're being, super quiet as far as an aircraft signature goes. And we depart, and as soon as we hit the border to Pakistan, we kind of turn all of our stuff back on once we get out of Afghanistan airspace. And one of the unique capabilities I have for my mission is we have a pretty legit comm suite on board, and one of the benefits is Wi-Fi. And so somebody turns on their phone, and we're all over Twitter. It's been 1 hour since I took off, and they had my call sign, a picture of my airplane, and a statement that said I was the last plane out of Kabul, Afghanistan. And so we screenshotted that with the article that accompanied it. That's probably the coolest picture I have from it.
Thank you again for your time today, and we value your expertise and unique perspective, which have enriched our views of ethics and human dignity and respect. On behalf of our 2022 NCLS participants, the Cadet Wing, and the faculty and staff of the Air Force Academy, we would like to present you with a small token of our appreciation. This concludes our session. We would appreciate audience feedback at our testimonial booth on the south side of the Arnold Hall Ballroom. Also, at the end of our NCLS experience, we invite you to take the cumulative survey on the event app or via the link that will be sent in an email to the Cadet Wing after NCLS closes. Additionally, the panel will be sticking around in F1 following this event for a short meet and greet opportunity if you have any further questions or would like to meet members of the panel. Thank you and have a great NCLS day.